around my story.
Do you remember me? Probably not. I'm the girl that can see the future from Wendy's story. I cannot use my real name for safety purposes. For now, call me Sarah. I might have sounded evil or even crazy in Wendy's story, but believe me, this is not even close to the truth. Let me tell you about myself. I come from an extremely strict family. I'm not allowed to have friends, I'm not allowed to leave the house except for school, and I'm barely allowed to access the internet. I live with my mom, my dad, and my much younger brother. I wouldn't say we're homeless, but we are poor. I discovered my power when I saved my mom's life one time. I was only a kid, and we were picking up my brother from daycare. Right before my mom crossed the street, I blacked out and had my very first vision. I ran out of the car and screamed for her to stop. The second she froze in her place, there was a car accident. She could have died. She cried and hugged me but never cared to ask how it happened. We're not a close family, so I never told anyone. I kept having those visions ever since. Years later, I learned how to control them. The few minutes of internet I was allowed, I always tried to look for a reason why or how I got my power. I never got an answer. I needed a distraction because I felt lost and like I did not belong. Now that I'm finally in high school, I asked my parents if I could have a part time job after school. They never gave me any money, and to be honest, I needed some. I knew they were going to say no, but to my surprise, they agreed on one condition that I give them half of my paycheck. I agreed. I got a job as a waitress in a local restaurant, and it was weird dealing with new people, but it was also so exciting. I quickly made a couple of friends who worked with me. I couldn't bring myself to trust them, but at least I had someone to talk to. One day at the restaurant, I heard some customers talking about something called the dark web. I wondered what it was. After my shift, I casually mentioned it to one of my colleagues. He explained everything to me. It was on my mind day and night. It sounded like a place full of weird people, just like me. With my first paycheck, I bought a new phone and kept it a secret from my parents. I immediately used it to access the dark web. It didn't look scary to me. I entered the chat room and decided I wanted to tell my secret to a stranger. You know what they say. Confide your heart to a stranger. The guy seemed harmless, and he actually listened to me. Next day, I found an email from an unknown address. It was a picture of my house. I got so scared, and I turned off my phone. I went to school, and when I came back, my phone was turned on. There was another email, and it read, "You're going to help us accomplish a few missions. You'll get your share of the money. Meet me at this address at 11 p.m. tonight. If you try to act smart, you'll regret it." I had no idea what to do, but I knew I had to go. I snuck out that night and met the person from the email. He wore a mask and he threw some pictures at me. They were pictures of my family members. The first thing he said was, "Do you want them dead?" I shook my head. He said, "A quick test. What's going to happen in a few seconds?" I opened my eyes wide and said, "A black car will come pick us up." He nodded his head in approval. He blindfolded me and put me in the car. After a few minutes, he said, "You're coming with me. The guys here will do the work, and you will guide us." I nodded my head, even though I didn't know what he was talking about. Much later, they drove me back to the same address, gave me some cash, and threw me out the car. I removed the blindfold, and it was already morning. I had to run back home before my parents wake up, and that was the first of many, many missions to come. For a minute there, I enjoyed the thrill and the cash. Sometimes it was too much, and sometimes I had to skip school. And of course, I quit my job. I worked for them for what seemed like a year, until what I feared the most happened. The gang I worked for asked me to help them track a person so they can kill him. It was not a matter of choice. It's either I help them or they kill me and my whole family. I tried to ignore the email. However, an hour later, a server appeared on my phone. It was titled, "We see you." And it was full of pictures from inside my house. 30 seconds later, the page dropped and disappeared. I can't even tell the police. I can't do anything. That is when it occurred to me that the only untraceable person in the whole world is Wendy. Next day at school, I looked all around for her. I finally ran into her in the bathroom. I couldn't utter a word. I only had one hope, that she would hear my thoughts. I focused as hard as I can to think loud and clear. Wendy was fixing her lipstick in the mirror, and after a few minutes, she dropped her lipstick and looked at me. I begged her inside my head to keep her mouth shut. She blinked twice and left. The mission is happening in 24 hours. What if Wendy can't help? I didn't get a second of sleep that night. I know you think I'm a bad person, and I won't argue much, but killing someone was crossing the line. I wanted to get out of this long ago, and I couldn't. Now I have to help them kill an innocent person? Time just flew by. I got an email, and I had to drag myself to meet them. Their big boss looked at me and said, "This time you'll get cash and a fake degree. So stop acting like a baby and get to work." I nodded. I thought about giving them wrong information, but I knew I'll get caught. A sniper was waiting for a signal for me to shoot. I was only a few feet away from the victim. I was shaking nonstop. Right before I gave the signal, I heard a police siren. I looked at the sniper and he was about to shoot. I jumped and knocked the innocent man down, but I got shot in the arm. In the blink of an eye, the gang disappeared into thin air. Police called paramedics, and to my surprise, Wendy was here. She practically saved my life. Or are they going to find me and kill me and my family? The police confiscated my phone. My wound was properly taken care of, and they called my parents. To this point, I was not interrogated yet. My parents came, and they couldn't look me in the eyes. A police officer explained what happened, and told them, "She's staying with us until further notice." And they all left. Well, except for Wendy. Her dad was cool enough to let her stay with me until police asked her to leave. She looked at me and said, "You owe me one, gangster." And we both laughed. A police officer came and informed us that Wendy will have to stay here as well, for her own safety. She looked at me and whispered, "We'll have a gang of our own when all of this is over." I smiled and didn't say anything. Wendy's face got serious and she asked me, "How am I gonna explain to them what happened in details? We cannot just tell the police we have superpowers." Before I could answer, a police officer came in and took her for questioning. Now, we're both in trouble with the dark web gang and the police. Wendy came back and they took me. She whispered, "We're doomed." I thought to myself so that Wendy could hear me say, "Oh, you think we're doomed? Wait until the gang finds us, and they will." I left the room feeling scared as ever. Do you guys think we'll ever be safe again? Do you think I got Wendy in trouble? Can I ever make up for the mess I made? If you want to know what happened to us, let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
I don't really like Indian movies because the actors are always overreacting, and the movies are not logical at all. But this is just my personal opinion. However, I've discovered that there are stories stranger than Indian movies. Let me give you a real-life example. I'll tell you a story about a young woman named Samantha. Samantha was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived with her grandmother after her parents died in a horrible car accident. The whole country read about it. She had many friends, and all the neighbors liked her. They considered her the most beautiful girl in town. Many had proposed to her, but she didn't care much for them. One day, Samantha was walking alone down the street after visiting one of her friends. Suddenly, she had an eerie feeling that someone was following her. She began running and crying for help. Her follower began running and stopped her. He was an ugly man, pointing a knife in her direction. He asked her to hand over her purse. She threw it at him and made a run for it. The man said wait and made to stop her, but another man appeared out of nowhere and punched the thief, who fell unconscious. The brave and good Samaritan picked up Samantha's purse and handed it to her. He was very handsome, with green eyes, soft hair, and an amazing smile. He escorted her back home, and she felt that he was her knight in shining armor. She went inside and hugged her grandmother tight, who was a little surprised but smiled. Samantha was so happy that she gently pulled her grandmother to her feet, and they whirled around and danced playfully. The very next day, she was surprised when she answered the doorbell. Steve, the tall, handsome man, was standing there, holding flowers. He proposed to her, and she said yes. Thus began their love story. Then one day, Samantha was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Steve and her grandmother were out, but they were supposed to be back soon. Samantha had everything ready, and she set the table. The house door opened, and Steve walked in. Samantha went to greet him, but she felt dizzy and fainted. Steve quickly took her to the hospital. The doctor congratulated Steve, saying that he was going to be a father. Steve was ecstatic, but Samantha was not. Instead, she was shocked and nervous. She said that she was too young to have kids, that she wasn't ready to be a mother. Steve was taken aback and said, "But why? Don't you want him?" Things were different from that point on. Samantha tried to get an abortion several times, but Steve was always stopping her. She couldn't accept it. She blamed Steve, but Steve couldn't understand her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Samantha was with her grandmother at the supermarket when she saw a small boy run onto the road. Fearing he might get run over by a car, Samantha quickly pulled the boy off the road to safety. The boy's mother saw what happened and thanked Samantha, feeling so grateful and relieved. Samantha was crying at the moment and replied, "No need to thank me. I'm going to be a mother like you soon." For the first time, she was beginning to feel real affection for the baby. "Forgive me," she silently thought to herself. She tried to contact Steve many times to tell him that she had finally accepted. She was ready to become a mother, but he never responded. Finally, the day had come. Samantha went to the hospital to give birth. After the surgery, she was very tired. Nevertheless, when she woke up, she immediately asked for the baby. Her grandmother handed her the child. It was a daughter, and she was so beautiful. The nurse tried to take the baby out of her arms, but Samantha refused, wanting to hold her for as long as she could. The next day, Samantha heard a big commotion, and she had a feeling of dread that something bad had just happened. It was confirmed when she saw her grandmother's face. She asked what had happened, and her grandmother told her that a child was missing and had apparently been kidnapped. Samantha's pale face slowly pleaded, "Please don't tell me that it was my daughter." When her grandmother nodded, Samantha broke down and began crying and wailing in pain. The nurses tried to calm her down, and when she did, her grandmother came over to her and handed her a note. It had been found in her missing daughter's hospital crib. It was in Steve's handwriting. It simply said, "If you don't want her, I do." Then Samantha fainted. For many years, she tried finding her baby, but couldn't. Steve and her daughter had vanished into thin air. She felt as if time had stopped for her, but Steve didn't feel that way. He raised their daughter into a beautiful young woman. He named her Margot. Whenever Margot asked about her mother, Steve would always tell her that her mother was dead, but he often told her stories about her mother and how much he had loved her. Margot's intuition, however, told her that her father wasn't being completely honest with her and that he was hiding some big dark secret. One day, Steve fell ill unexpectedly. He called Margot to him